This is N7GES, and welcome to the NCARC TechNet. Some of you have already heard that there's been some issues already sort of come into play, and we hope to continue that discussion. I will say this net is sponsored by the Northern Colorado Amateur Radio Club. The purpose of the net is to answer questions and discuss issues around amateur radio. Our primary purpose originally was technical issues that people didn't fully understand from their license testing, and other issues that have come up since the license testing that they don't fully understand and would like to discuss further, specific issues that they've come up with. This evening I've made the either the good or bad step of choosing some topics here which may be a bit controversial, so I want to say right from the get-go, I would like to keep this a positive net. I would like to avoid arguments. I would like to keep it an honest debate. I would like to keep us from just rehashing the same comments over and over again. So please listen. If you have heard something before, there may be no reason to restate it unless you were perhaps going to add to it. But let's keep it honest and open. Let's keep everybody's comments as to be valuable, and let's avoid any kind of downplaying of character or anything of that nature here. We have not tolerated that in the past, and I see no reason to begin that now. I don't see any reason for that to appear on the radio in general. So let's keep that in mind. Questions are all okay. As Joe has many times said, there's no dumb question except when you haven't asked it, or perhaps if you haven't at least looked for an answer here or there. But that is the way we learn, is by asking questions. So I think that's certainly valid as well. Do we have any emergency or priority traffic before we continue? Okay, my first comment also to those of you who have been looking for net topics to appear in advance of the nets, I do apologize to everybody. I haven't been organized enough since Joe gave this to me to get that going. I do have a work life and that sort of thing as well, so my time is somewhat limited. I'm working at doing better with it, but it may not ever be perfect, as I can't afford to spend all my time doing it. I will, however, do the best I can. So, with that in mind, hopefully we'll have future topics and maybe even beyond the next week coming up for you. So I am working on that. Also, before we get further, I would like to encourage, if you have comments or questions or suggestions, I could use them. Very, very much appreciated. Right now, I guess the easiest way to contact me is via PAO, as in Public Affairs Officer, at ncarc.net, as in Northern Colorado Amateur Radio Club.net. And I will get those emails. I will take them into consideration and will appreciate them very much. All right, so we have I provided a couple of links today. If you have a chance to take a look at them, please do, either right now if you can, just so that we can discuss, or later so that you can get the full picture. I am going to have Bart read a portion of one of them, which is something that is only in its consideration stages by the ARRL, and is not anything that has been passed yet. And then we'll go on from there. So Bart, if you're ready to read, I will turn it over to you. If not, I will fill in for a bit more.
I'm ready to go. Thank you, Kevin. This is first two paragraphs of a direct quote from the first article that Kevin posted on the website. asked the FCC to expand HF privileges for technician licensees to include limited phone privileges on 75, 40, and 15 meters, plus RTTY and digital mode privileges on 80, 40, 15, and 10 meters. Break. The FCC has not yet invited public comment on the proposals, which stem from recommendations put forth by the ARRL Board of Directors Entry-Level License Committee, which explored various initiatives and gauged member opinions in 2016 and 2017. This action will enhance the available license operating privileges in what has become the principal entry-level license class in the amateur service. ARRL said in its petition, it will attract more newcomers to amateur radio. It will result in increased retention of licensees who hold technician class licenses, and it will provide an improved incentive for entry-level licensees to increase technical self-training and pursue higher license class achievements and development of communication skills. And that's the end of the quote. Thank you. N0NYY, back to Net.
Okay, thank you very much. As you're wanting to make comments on this net, let's stick to sending me a suffix of your call only, and let me recognize you so that we don't get doubles and people talking over each other. And then hopefully that way everybody will be able to hear everybody's comments. Okay, so I believe there's a couple of issues here. I believe but I would hazard to say that one of the primary issues, things that we're trying to accomplish, that they are trying to accomplish, is getting more people interested in amateur radio. And to some degree, the attempt is to get more people to go further in amateur radio. Is this going to work? That's up for certainly conjecture. Is this going to cause difficulties on the HF bands? Yes, that's probably up to conjecture as well at this point in time. How many are going to take advantage of these things is probably another question. So let me open it up to you for questions or comments, and let's see where we can go with this, and if we can provide something helpful to the amateur community in general.
LCK?
Yes, I did hear you, Mike. I also will apologize. I did not take check-ins tonight. I'm still getting organized here as well. So consider your comments as a check-in, and feel free to check in whenever you would like to. LCK, go ahead, please.
This is KE0LCK, another Mike from Windsor, and looking over some of the information that was provided, just a couple of observations. They were talking about 378,000 technicians licensed, which comprise more than half of the radio population, which is quite a few people. So I think in part you can see what they're doing is that, yes, it is different. It's going to be a significant change if approved. I don't particularly care for it one way or the other. I don't know that it'll lead to other things being learned. I passed my license, then I learned. I got another grade, and I learned some more. And so now, as I get into different things, that's when I learn, when I try something different. I'll take a little break here and come back. A couple other things that I keep in mind when I'm doing something or facing something different. One is the phrase that I always liked: if you do what you've done, you get what you got. So if we continue on with the exact same thing, then we'll all be using CW. I don't think that's quite what we were looking for, and some of the changes that have been made in the past have been very positive. The other thing is, I own a vehicle with a continuously variable transmission. I don't have a clue how that thing works other than in general principles, nor do I really care. If I put it in D, it goes forward. If I put it in R, it goes backwards. So I just have a couple of observations, neither positive nor negative, just observations. Back to Ned.
Okay. I'd like to ask you a quick question now. What did you mean by if we keep on going the way we're going, we're all going to use CW? That was an interesting comment.
Well, there was changes that were made in the past to the examinations where it was not required anymore to have CW. I don't think that CW has died out, but I think it's significantly declined from where it was, whereas some of the digital data modes have taken off. It's not required that you know about them, but they are very popular to use right now. So my concern is that if we don't keep pace with some of the changes that are different technologies and different interests, then we may lose a lot of the younger people. I was thrilled to hear about Bertha High School and all the people that they were able to contact. That's absolutely positive, and I love that.
Okay, very good. I appreciate that. And okay. Other comments, please, or questions?
LAO?
Good evening, Luann. Go ahead.
Well, I'm going to come at this from a totally different angle. Yes, I took my test recently, and I, studied my butt off more than I probably needed to. It's not necessarily keeping up with new technologies. It's making sure that your constituency has the knowledge and the basic understanding to move forward with the new privileges. I didn't, I'm with Mike. I learned more once I could get my hands on it, and actually, had the advantage of Phil here, so seeing how the HF worked, and then going and getting my test. My major concerns, again, I've spent 23 years as an academic in higher education, so I kind of understand the educational piece of this. They have backed off from testing and assuring that people have a basic entry-level understanding with the multiple choice, not only multiple choice questions. It is no longer an exam. You're giving everybody the answers, so all they're doing is memorizing the answers so they can get the good housekeeping seal of approval stamped on their forehead. And by giving someone, it has been proven time and time again in academic studies that giving somebody something doesn't encourage them to learn more. Some will. Some are self-driven, some are self-educating. I know a lot of people that are. My husband and myself are that way. But most people, if they're given something, they're not going to move any further forward with that. They have their privileges. Why do they have to work? Back to the net.
Thanks, Luann. Other comments to all of this?
You okay?
Go ahead, Marty.
Hey, good evening, guys and gals. That was a good comment there from Luann, but I want you to understand that if you don't think that people are just memorizing the test to get their general, you are hiding under a rock. It's been going on for years and years and years, and it's going to continue that way. For example, you guys didn't know anything about HF, but you had your license. Had no clue. None. How do I put an antenna up? Nothing. Until you had your license and got on the air on VHF, UHF, which you didn't need a general license for, you started asking all these questions. How do I work on HF? So that argument is moot. Take it right off the books. Nobody knows anything about running HF after they have their license, and it doesn't matter if it's general questions or multiple questions or it. Nobody knows, well, very few people know how to build an antenna, how to run an HF station, just because they have the license to do it. So I'm going to take that argument right off the books, in my own opinion. And my other opinion is, just like somebody's, Terry, LKC, there's more people licensed now that the restrictions are, we don't have so much restriction. So, you know, there's a lot of people, I said this an hour ago, there's a lot of people out there that wouldn't have their ham if we had code. And so now they're going to give HF advantages. Well, okay. You know what? That prepper that somebody said earlier may be the guy that saves your life in a flood, even though he doesn't know how to. You don't know what these people know. See, everybody's judging because they didn't study the book. You're just judging that they don't know anything, and I think that's wrong because there's a lot of people that are hams that know a lot of stuff that you don't know what they know. So I'm kind of, I think a lot of you guys are really being negative about this, in my own opinion. Casey's are okay.
I wasn't going to pick up the HT, but I can't resist W0LEV.
Okay, we had a double. LAO, go ahead.
Well, I agree with you, Marty, that you don't always know what a person brings to the party or the page or whatever. It's a concern because of what I've seen for 23 years. And also, you should know Phil better than that. He actually had an HF radio and had installed an antenna before he had his license. And you had never seen a person just twitch in front of a radio because he knew he couldn't key up. But he made sure, you know, there are lots of people that do that. And there are lots of people that take advantage. And I'm not under any illusion that people haven't memorized questions for years. But that's my concern.
Okay, thank you.
LEV.
Yeah, thank you. LEV, go ahead.
Yeah, I would also disagree with the precept that people don't know anything when they get their license. I understood HF, and this goes back 59 years for me. I'm working on year 59 as a licensed ham. I understood HF well before I got my first novice license. I was an SWL before that. I knew I wanted a license because I wanted to understand better the magnetosphere and ionosphere. I think in the old days, yeah, people well understood what they were getting into when they got their first license. The reason they did is because they SWL'd and they decided it was interesting, and by gum, they got their licenses. That's me. And I don't think the argument stands where you don't know anything when you get a license. That's the whole idea of passing the license exam, that you go in with some basic knowledge, which I find in my personal experience, both professionally and as an amateur, is not true anymore. I've heard the question asked a number of times on this repeater, well, how long do I cut a 40-meter dipole? And this is an extra. Well, okay, if it's 60 feet, is that 60 feet per leg or for the whole thing? Oh, and do I feed it in the center? I mean, this is an extra. they should know, and they don't. Enough said on my part. W0LEV, back to the kitchen.
This is N7GES with the TechNet ticklish issue this evening. I guess before we go much further, I guess I would like to ask, what is the reason for offering these changes? Are we accomplishing our purpose? Do you think we will accomplish our purpose? Does anybody think? I think there are. We can safely say there are a lot of us on this frequency that don't feel like this is going to truly encourage anybody to either get their license or upgrade. But I know there are other views out there. Obviously there are, because the FCC or the ARRL is making these suggestions. So what I'd like to do right now is hear from anybody who thinks adding privileges to the tech bans, the tech privileges, are maybe going to actually encourage them to want to study further and get more of those privileges. Or will these changes perhaps encourage people that have never had their licenses to get into their license, to get their license? I do remember several years ago when the code went out, that there was a lot of talk about, hey, the CW is not required anymore. It didn't say, people didn't say, hey, you don't have to study anything. It just was that the CW requirement wasn't there. That didn't mean you didn't have to study, learn the questions either by memory or by theory. And yes, I'm sure that several people did memorize answers only for many, many years. I don't know if that's increased or decreased, but it's certainly always been something that some people would do. However, that was used as a motivator, and I do think that maybe that did open up some things. So I don't know how much. I don't have any statistics to base that on. So what I would like to know is, does anybody have any feelings that that may encourage radio participation in general?
Comment, QOK, with a question also.
Okay, we had a double. I'll take QOK first.
All right, so your question is, opening up HF, is that going to make more people want to get a license? All right, here's my question, and I know a lot of preppers. They don't give 2 cents about HF. HF in a crisis situation locally is not the way to go. VHF, UHF. So that's where these preppers are going, because that comment came up earlier from Dave. Well, these preppers. Well, yeah, there's preppers, and by God, it's a good thing we have them. So my question is, what frequency are preppers gonna operate on? VHF, UHF, or HF? And why is this such a, I don't understand why this is such a big problem for people, whether you studied or not, to get more people. And then you network with preppers to save your own hide. I think the more people, we're better off. So, here's my question. If we're going to prep, are we going to be on VHF, UHF, or HF?
Okay. First of all, we already have VHF and UHF. So the question here is, I think, first of all, my question was, is this going to encourage people? your question, I think, if I understand it correctly, is, what's going to, which bands are going to be the most inspiring to people? You also made some comments about which bands would be of most use. And I think before we can answer that, we have to consider what's the emergency going to be. Let's go on to our other comment, and I did not hear who it was. Would you come back again?
W0DDZ.
Good evening, Dave. DDZ, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin. I definitely have a few cents to drop. To answer your question about does it accomplish getting people encouraged into radio alone, I would say no. And I think some of the good old boys in amateur radio are kind of missing the point. As I've talked to more and more people, one of the things that I seem to hear as a common occurrence is that there are no Elmers to be had. I hear about the times when you had an Elmer assigned and people would go to that person's house and learn about it and have somebody to transmit, and that does not happen anymore. And though we have found or have looked for solutions on how to get people's questions answered, it's not necessarily happening. The only barrier to think that the only barrier to getting into HF is licensing is kind of naive also. The cost of radios and people buying radios, people getting a $1,000 radio without knowing how it works is ridiculous. I'm going to let this drop for 1 sec. Sorry about that. So the other point that I would make is that it's a tool for us to use to encourage people to get into the radio and to show people that they can use it. And it's not like it's going to be just one or the whole entire band that they're going to be on. It's a section of the band just like it is the CW. And this can be used as a tool for amateurs that are in the hobby, that are older and have more privileges to help people get into it and to learn about it. We have stiff competition these days in amateur radio. Kids nowadays can go play a video game while talking to the people that they're playing in their first-person shooter world, and we're asking them to choose amateur radio because it's interesting and they want to learn about it. Like, it seems so discouraging to have people be so negative about things being different these days than they were back in the day, and it is different these days. And unless you want to discourage the hobby from ever growing and let it die out, or we can make the choice to try to encourage people ourselves and be a welcoming part of amateur radio. W0DDZ.
Amen, brother, amen.
N0WIQ with comment.
This is N7GES with the TechNet. Carrie, go ahead. Welcome and good evening.
Well, probably the most obvious thing is you want to have people ready to help out in an emergency. It takes out a lot of the superstructure that we use as for granted. So anyway, that is the main argument for amateur radio is, one, they train to handle themselves in an emergency. Two, they have the heartfelt issue of wanting to be able to help people. And the training makes it so they actually help instead of hinder and all that kind of stuff. As far as the technology in amateur radio, well, when I was earning a paycheck, I worked with transmitters and receivers that were used for testing, not used for communicating. So the technology part was always easy for me. It was the rules for operating a transmitter and the rules for being courteous and all that kind of stuff. And courtesy is one of the things that is lacking from this generation compared to when I grew up and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, hey, showing interest, getting an interest in wanting to be able to help is probably the biggest thing for, and being able to help under any condition is one of the big things that you might use to coax people into amateur radio. And then you tell them about with a radio they can work without a superstructure, period. They have to afford the equipment. They have to learn how to use it. They have to learn what wavelengths work for what and all that kind of stuff. But hey, it all starts with the basic idea. I want to help. Then I want to learn how to help. Then I want the equipment that makes it easier for me to help. So that's the way I look at it. Back to Net.
Okay, very good. Other questions? Questions at this point with these topics?
WBC with a comment.
N0BF.
Okay, I have two. WDC, I think. Good evening. Welcome.
That's WBC, Whiskey Bravo Charlie. This is Pete. Hey, as a ham with an older license for a few years and then a reconnection to the hobby for the right reasons, I've got two comments. I really agree with the fact that there's a lot of limiting factors that go into HF and wanting a general or an extra price for equipment and the knowledge to know what you're doing. And it is a limiting factor. I don't think that just offering other frequencies other brands will make a big difference for newcomers. It might help some people in the hobby, which would be great, but I don't think they're going to go very far. It took me a few steps to get to where I am to want to go further out of curiosity and wanting to learn a lot about radio and whatnot. With that said, I'm going to push forward, but on the second note, I would like to say that this club does a great job. I did attend the HF seminar a couple weekends ago, and I really appreciated that, and I think that's a really good way to make people go further. And
W7RF with a comment.
Yeah, stand by RF. Pete, I think your timer timed out on you, and I don't know if you were quite finished yet.
like I said, for a new person, it did a little bit. I set it to be there, so I didn't go too far. But yeah, I really appreciate the club's help, and I think that the people that have some experience make a big difference to push people in the hobby in the right direction. So I don't think it's too much of an offer to give this ability to get people into the hobby. I don't think it will, and I don't think people will go far and abuse it too bad, because you've got to want to learn to do it right. And I think clubs like this make it easier. WBC, that's my comment. Thank you.
Certainly. And don't forget to give your full call when you're finished with a comment, just to make sure that you have identified at the appropriate time there. Especially in a discussion like this, it may be a while before we get back to you again. We had two other comments. N0BF, good evening, Steve. Welcome.
Oh, yes. Good evening, Kevin. This is N0BF, and thanks for letting me check in here. I was just curious as to what the issue was, so I went on the web here, and I see that the ARRL is going to request expanded HF privileges for technician licenses on 75, 40, and 15 meters. So I wonder if that's the issue, Kevin, and that's all I wanted to know. This is N0BF, and thanks for letting me check in.
Yeah, good evening. I think we started out as a to discuss, how beneficial was this going to be for newbies? How beneficial was it going to be to amateur radio? Was it going to encourage participation in radio? Was it going to encourage upgrading and interest in more learning in amateur radio? You have any comments regarding those things?
No, not really, Kevin. I didn't even know the issue existed. I just turned on the computer here, and I see this was issued by the ARRL on February 28th of 2018, so just recently. So I'm going to read it and see if I can understand what they're suggesting, but no, I don't really have an idea about it yet. I just don't even know what the issue is yet, but thanks a lot. And I'll listen to people's comments. Apparently other people have known about this for a while. This is N0BF, and thanks again for letting me check in.
Oh, sure thing. I don't know how many people have known about this particular issue for how long, but this has been a long-standing topic, going clear back to at least where the Morse code requirement was dropped, and maybe even before that. I'm not sure. There's always been changes, and it's always a question of, are those really going to encourage amateur radio participation and an interest in growing that? So thank you, Steve. W7RF, good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Kevin and the net. This is Dan, W7RF in Fort Collins. I think what I see basically is something for nothing. More privileges, less effort to do anything about it. The licenses are there to go ahead and upgrade to become a general class licensee. You can go ahead and get on HF on those frequencies with a general class license if one was actually motivated to do so. Now, what the motivation might be, it might vary amongst individuals, but here you're going to go ahead and give away privileges for no extra effort. Where's the skin in the game? I don't see it. What I do see is I see manufacturers probably benefiting quite a bit by selling more HF radios to people that didn't have those privileges before, and now through no additional effort on their part have the ability to operate on those frequencies. It's a continual slide of amateur radio, in my opinion, as far as standards and quality. If a guy wants to operate on a particular frequency or mode, he should learn about it and get a license. Things are so easy today, so easy. Just talk to Dave when he used to have to draw schematics or find out what part was not correct or missing on a schematic. I know things are different today, and the reason our things are different today is because people want something for nothing. We're not that far away from just grab a crayon and mark an X in the box for your signature. W7RF.
Okay. And for Steve's benefit, thank you, Dan. For Steve's benefit, again, this is only in discussion phase right now. Nothing has been, I don't think they've even formally requested it. I think they're just discussing it. So no permanent changes have been made yet. It's just something that has been in discussion, and it was suggested to me as a topic, and as I said, we've had discussions like this before with similar changes in the licensing, and so I think it's worthwhile to discuss that. I'd still like to know, to hear from people, if changes in the band privileges, I should say, are, let's say, for example, they're not going to be as big a motivator for encouraging people to get into the hobby and to learn more about it. If, in fact, that does not prove to be the case, what else is going to help that besides, getting some sort of Elmering going again, and especially what's going to help us differentiate what we are doing here from what everybody is doing on the internet. And that sort of leads up to our second article, which is on here, which I have to say, to some degree, is definitely an advertisement for some new products. And now I'm referring to an article about what they're calling network radio, which in short are some new radios that function as traditional handy-talkies, but in addition to having standard RF bands that they work on, will also work through the internet in the various platforms, such as Echolink, so that instead of using a cell phone or a tablet, you would pull out your network radio and tune it to the Echolink band, set up a channel there as you would with your cell phone, but in a different interface perhaps, and then use the radio with its push-to-talk button instead of tapping the transmit button on the radio. So the point of the article, along with introducing those things, was: is this going to be perhaps a way for us to talk to the internet folks and help them understand a little bit more? Let me reset for completely here. My radio said da-da-da-da-dit. Anybody know what that means?
Zero.
Of course. Da-da-da-da, it means end of transmission.
I think you'd ought to be pointing to the ARRL presentation, talking mostly about RF and how it has changed our normal world rather than anything else. I mean, a scientist is a step above an engineer. An engineer is a step above an associate, like I was, and all that kind of stuff. But as a technician working with transmitters and receivers, I learned about RF clear up to 100 megahertz and clear down to a fraction of a hertz. So what can I say? The scientific idea is very good, but everything you mentioned takes infrastructure where using the RF to do everything that an amateur radio operator can do with the RF does not take superstructure, or infrastructure. So back to net.
Okay. Thank you, Kerry. And yeah, I was being a little facetious when I asked if anybody knew what that meant. Dan, I knew you would. I definitely know. I think it's kind of clever that Kenwood has put that feature in. It's Morse code, and this radio communicates with me both in voice and Morse code, and I think that's really cool. And no, I'm not trying to say everybody needs to go out and learn it. I just, it was kind of interesting as we were talking about. So my comment was, by having new technologies, are we going to be able to encourage more use of amateur radio? Is this going to be a way for us to maybe interface with some of the internet community? Is this going to be a way for them to understand what we're doing a little better? I kind of have my doubts, but I'd like to hear other people's comments on that. And again, I'm referring to the second article, which is talking specifically about what is called network radios.
W7RF.
Ooh, thank you for silencing the crickets, Dan. Go ahead.
Well, what I see with network radio is something we have the ability to do now that might require a brain cell to go ahead and put it together, as opposed to now it'll be inside the radio in a menu or a switch or a button already done for us. Sort of like the thrill of turning your radio on a certain frequency, doing no tuning, might as well put it on the floor in a box, watch the computer screen, go to the bathroom, go have dinner, come back and see how many stations you've worked. You know something, all I can say is I must be a dinosaur because I don't get it, and I don't think I'll ever get it. I don't get it. Where's the skill? Where's the pride of accomplishment? Where's the joy of learning something new that one can actually say, I'm proud of what it is I've developed for myself, as opposed to use like a toaster?
W0ASP with a comment.
Ooh, we had a couple together. I heard Terry and your new call sign, W0ASP. Did I get it right?
Yes, you did, Kevin. W0ASP, a new call sign, formerly KD0ZWU. I have to agree with Dan, and with some experience recently with our high school radio roundup contest. This is a bunch of high school kids who were all used to the cell phone generation. But when you put them on an HF radio and they start to work a pile-up and they can contact multiple countries and multiple states, that put a fire in their eyes that I will not forget. And I believe that would be the way to get people into amateur radio. They can already push a button and text someone, but when they actually get to hear a human voice on the other end with whatever accent it is and whatever modulation there is on the ionosphere and the HF environment, this is a new experience to them, and they appreciated it.
W0DDZ.
This is N7GES with the NCARC TechNet. And yes, Dave, thank you. I was coming to you next.
Well, sorry, Kevin, I didn't hear that you had gotten me under Terry there. So when I was a kid, it was significantly different than it is today. We didn't have cell phones. We had to walk to our friend's house. Every single friend that we had lived within a couple of miles of us, of me. You don't have friends very far away. Wireless communication was interesting and had the edge of doing something that other things couldn't do. Amateur radio has lost that edge. People can talk easier, farther, with more people, and not have the pile-up problem like we do here, using, yes, what Kerry calls infrastructure, but people don't necessarily care about that. What we are asking them to do is to get into the hobby with us and learn about the hobby, and it's our jobs as Elmers and other amateur radio operators to teach them. I also, Terry, was very encouraged by the Berthoud High School, and I believe I heard that they had placed pretty high. I'm not sure that I had heard exactly where, and I'm not going to put out bad information, but my point. Let me let this drop, and I'll pick it back up. My point would be that none of those kids had a license, and they had worked with people that were willing to give them the time of day and teach them something about the radio that's getting harder and harder to find, because everybody thinks that it should be the way it was 60 years ago when they got into it, and it's not. And it's not the same playing field as it was back then. The point that I guess I'm trying to make is that this hobby doesn't survive without bringing new blood into it and going with the change. If giving some of the technicians some privileges that they can get their feet wet in. And really, like, to be honest with you, I don't think that it accomplishes anything at all, because there's so many barriers to HF that giving them privileges is just saying, hey, you could do this if you wanted to and wanted to learn how to do this, and that could get them eager and interested in it and to start working with somebody to try to figure out how. But not every area is like this area, where we have the advantage of having a lot of people on the radio and an active repeater and an active club and people that actually care enough to try to teach people. There are places where people's repeaters are dead, and they get their information through the internet, relying on that infrastructure, and they're trying to get in the hobby, and they're getting frustrated because they can't seem to do it. And every time they see some way, like the antenna deal with the HOAs, there's always barriers, and sometimes we think that we're going to get somewhere, and then stuff changes, and it's so discouraging to see people so not wanting to go with the change and help to encourage amateurs to learn how to do new things. W0DDZ back to net.
K0LAO.
LAO, go ahead.
Dave, I think you hit it right on the head. I think the FCC, with expanding the privileges, has missed the mark. The intent is good to encourage people, and you're absolutely right about getting new people involved. And even, Marty has the right intention, but not understanding the concerns that some of us. And I'm not an old dog. I mean, I may be an old dog in chronology, but I'm not an old dog in the amateur radio. But, and like Terry said, it was amazing to get those kids involved. Who knows how many are going to get their licenses, but they'll know about it. But the difference between what you're talking about, Elmer's, what we did with the high school kids, it's a structured introduction. We showed them how to operate. We gave them the comfort to get on there and do it. You know, you take away the majority of frustration. And listening to what you said, I'm super privileged, and, I can probably speak for Christy as well. We have built-in Elmers, and so the transition was not as difficult as some people experience. So I'm thinking the FCC needs to shift the focus not into giving things away for nothing, but encouraging people to work.
And let me just we doubled Marty. I'll get back to you in a second. Let me just clarify that I think, Luann, what you probably mean is the ARRL encouraging these things, because of course the FCC is just granting band privileges, and I don't know. They're not going to be so much concerned with encouragement of use of the frequencies, unless, of course, it came down to our businesses demanding the frequencies, and are they not getting enough use by amateurs that they may need to start, selling those. And we won't go there tonight, but that's a whole nother set of things to discuss, I'm sure. But I agree with everything you said, except just to change the term from FCC to ARRL, just for clarity's sake. Marty, go ahead.
Well, I'm just curious, how many people out there tonight have a technician license and got that license because the FCC relaxed their requirement for code, and I'll put my hand up for that because I just couldn't get it. I guess I wasn't committed, so call me a bad ham, but I couldn't do it. How many people out there, just hopefully it doesn't take forever, but how many people are out there have a license because we have no code?
K0PRB.
W0DDZ.
KC0RBT.
W0RDC.
M0WIQ.
KE0OXB.
LCK.
Pro ASP.
KR1 STW.
All right, I'll just stop it off at that. KC0QOK, reset. 10 people right there, folks. 10 hams. And to sit here and gripe about having HF privileges given to those people seems to be one of the most ignorant conversations I've heard in my life. 10 people right there that have made a commitment to your community that when help needs to be here, they're there. 10 in 30 seconds. I really think you old-timers that think that you have to study and you have to do this are out of your mind. I just proved my point. KC0QOK.
W7RF.
Comment.
Yeah, stand by. N7GES with the TechNet. How shall I word this? I'm going to hold off. We had a huge number of check-ins just now, and I should have been writing them down. However, I think some of these were comments as well as just acknowledgments. So I need to go back and just ask for comments again so that we have some structure here, because I was not doing my due and writing as I should have been. Other comments to this, and who just called before I came back? Let's go that way first.
W7RF.
Okay, go ahead, Dan.
I think with what Marty said exactly exemplifies where we're going with all this stuff. Sort of like the minimum wage argument. If $10 is good, why not 15? Why not 25? Why not 100? So in this particular case, if you're going to go ahead and give technician class licensees HF privileges, why not give them all extras? Why have any licensing requirements at all? The point is a tiered process where one can go ahead and choose to learn more to get more privileges, to go ahead and actually learn something. And if you don't want to learn something, believe me, it is so easy right now. A 10-year-old kid can walk in with no license and walk out as an extra. How much easier do you need it to be to encourage somebody to say, gee, I think I want to go ahead and do something? The problem is not that. The problem is with the person. When I want to research something, I don't have to wait for someone to knock me on the shoulder and say, hey, Dan, would you like to learn something new? No. I research it. I look into it. I discover. I'm always learning. If somebody's not motivated to learn, giving them something for free is not the way.
W0DDZ with a comment.
DDZ, go ahead.
First off, I would like to point out that we're not asking them to get into something really new. We're asking them to get into something really old. And as a person who spends a significant portion of my time teaching a lot of people how to use new technologies, computers, and the like, networks and whatnot, it's a lot easier for me to get younger people to adapt to the changes in technology than it is older people that are more stuck in their ways. So when we're talking about getting people into amateur radio and getting people into our hobby, there is some ultimate underlying facts. If the airwaves are not used, then people that are wanting to use them for commercial purposes are going to point that out and try to use that to get the privileges taken away, and then everybody loses. We as a community have the obligation to try to encourage people to get into the community and encourage people to learn. If we make it so that it's a good old boys club, we discourage them from wanting to learn or be a part of the community, and everybody loses in that case. I would point out that I am a general. I started as a no-code technician, and I would think that I am a person that's worth more than minimum wage because I have a lot that I can offer to the company or to the club. And to have somebody think that just because I'm a no-code technician that I don't have anything to offer to the club, or because the learning requirements for me were different than the learning requirements were for you, it's somewhat insulting.
Comment K0PRB.
Thank you, Phil. I knew I had heard somebody in there that I hadn't recognized yet. Go ahead.
I think everybody's making some really good points tonight, but kind of almost skirting around an issue here, and that's having the knowledge to run a radio and to get out there. Carrie mentioned, having Elmers, and I agree with that. But this isn't something that we have just. Where we have an apprentice and we just bring them up, and then here they are. Now we've apprenticed them into the hobby. This is one where you need really skilled knowledge, and I'm not saying that certain people can't bring their skills and to the table and learn as they go along. I'm one who does that with many things. But even with when we talked about the code, what Marty brought up, and it's funny, I didn't think about what he was asking at the time, and I was jumping in with a comment because I thought the code was still part of the test. Even when I started studying for it, I had already ordered the books and started studying, and then I learned, oh wait, I don't have to learn the code. So it wasn't the code that caused me to. Or not having the code that caused me to get into the hobby. I was going to do it anyway. My question is, and people just need to ask themselves this. They don't need to reply here, but how many people would have tested if the questions weren't available to study? So the questions and the answers are out there. Many people studied them. They just memorized them, jumped right in. How many people would have gone into this hobby without the key and just study and say, okay, I'm ready to go take my test and see what happens?
Well, if that's the question, then I guess I can say me. I got no crutches. I learned and studied and got my test. W7RF.
You okay with that?
Everybody stand by, please. We had a bunch of doubles. Phil, I don't think you were quite finished yet. Would you go ahead and finish up after you reset?
Sorry about that. Yeah, time out on my end this time. But yeah, the thing is I would have studied. I didn't even know that the answers were in the back of the book when I got it. Well, after I got it, and then I saw that they were there, and I thought, well, that's kind of cool. But Luann can attest to this, too. I read through the entire book before I even looked at any of the questions and answers. And yes, I went in and took a quick test to see how I was doing, and I almost passed it the first time through after reading the book. So, you know, that's something, again, that everybody has to ask themselves. Could they have studied without those questions and the answers and feel confident that they would have made it through the test? This is K0PRB.
Excellent. Thanks. Stand by. I just want to confirm, Phil, that what you're saying is how many would have gotten the book and studied if the questions hadn't and the answers hadn't been, questions and the answers hadn't been in the back of the book? Is that essentially what you're asking here?
Affirmative. And would they have gone for the test at all?
Okay. Dan, does that, go ahead and make your comment again, because I think we had several doubles happening there.
In response to that, I was basically just affirming that I would have tested because I did. There was no volunteer examiners when it came to the upper class licenses. I studied and got my license basically by studying and taking an interest in something. Dave's right about this. It's an entirely different world today, and I understand that. Marty's also right about the Morse code thing. I don't think that Morse code is a good filter to go ahead and keep people out of amateur radio. A lot of people have no interest in that, and I appreciate that. It's not like they're going to go ahead and ruin the CW bands because we have no CW requirement. What I'm just basically saying is that if somebody has an interest in learning on something, they should be able to go ahead and continue their learning process with help from people if they need. And if not, the internet is right there. The difference is giving away more privileges for no additional effort on their part. That's what I have a problem with.
LCK?
LCK, go ahead.
SK0LCK. In part, a lot of people are right, even though they're on somewhat differing viewpoints for the situation. If you look at the page that you were directed to on the ARRL, at the bottom there's a tie-in to the actual legislation that ARRL is asking before the FCC. And if you go down to about, I don't know, page 7 or 8 or something like that, there's a chart where it shows the decline of the number of licensees up until, I'd say, when they dropped the HF requirements. But it's still very low. There was an initial bump, and then it's still very low. So I think, this is my opinion, that the ARRL is looking to increase the number of people that are licensee and still interested moving on. So how do they do that? The easiest way for them as a bureaucracy is to do what they say they're going to do. Is it right? Not necessarily. Is it wrong? It could be. But what they're looking at as a bureaucracy is how do we keep amateur radio continuing to at least stabilize, if not flourish. Back to net, KE0LCK.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. QOK, I did hear you. I will get back to you in a second. I want to open it up to anybody who hasn't yet made a comment who would like to. We've got a lot of folks on here. I heard a lot of new check-ins when Marty asked his code comment, and that's great. But I want to make sure anybody else who hasn't been in here yet has a chance to make any comments. This is N7GES with the TechNet.
Hey, W0RDC with a question.
Okay. Okay, we had a double. I heard RDC. Go ahead.
W0RDC. Thank you, Kevin. And I'm reading through this article here, and I'm down about 3/4 of the way, I suppose. And it says phone privileges. What are phone privileges? Is that FM? Is that sideband? Is that, what is that exactly?
If you were to check your band plan, most of those plans show where phone is used, and I think somebody set me straight if there are restrictions for FM on the lower frequencies. I know that nobody uses them. I can't remember if that's a restriction. It could be because it's such a wide frequency communication mode that it would take up a lot of usable bandwidth that could be used by others. Sidebands, SSB, is a narrow enough bandwidth that you can still crowd a lot of communication channels in a fairly narrow area. They do still make allowances for AM, although that's again a fairly wider spectrum. But CW certainly would be the primary one there. Can anybody just quickly answer, is FM restricted to something like 10 meters?
I think the easiest way to go ahead and describe that is basically when they say phone privileges, they mean any legal voice privileges, any legal voice mode. And you are correct, conventional wideband FM is way too wide. They have restrictions on approximately, I think it's 3 kilohertz is what they have for a bandwidth on HF frequencies below, I don't know, was it below 6 meters or 2 meters or something like that? I don't even remember. No, below 6 meters, I guess it would be. Below 10 meters. I'm not totally sure on that. I know you can use 10 meter FM, but not below that for FM. W7RF.
N0WIQ with comment.
Stand by, Kerry. Rob, does that answer your question sufficiently?
Absolutely, and I appreciate it, Dan. Yeah, I was just curious because there are so many different new technologies evolving here. I believe that opening it up to exploration for the new technician in these bands, I suppose, will help promote. I think the bottom line here is how do we get them before they become a ham? How do we strike up the interest? I know we had the radio roundup here a couple of weeks ago. That was a very big success. I think we need to do more along those lines to encourage the younger populations or the younger generations to get into the hobby. W0RDC.
Kilo Zero Echo Victor.
Okay, we have quite a queue here. Let me write a few calls down before I forget them. Okay, let me go back a bit here. QOK, I believe you did have a comment quite a while back. You want to come again?
Well, Kevin, my comment was so far ago I forgot what I was going to say, but I think the point was well taken. There's a lot of people that got into ham without the requirement for Morse code. And I would love to learn Morse code. My brain can't do it. It's an invaluable tool. I can still do SOS. It's ingrained in my brain. But this whole thing of not moving forward, and I haven't read the thing, but it sounds like techs are going to get a little more HF privilege, and people are kind of sour because you didn't learn it. Well, like I said before, I don't know of any. I hear them all the time. Well, how do you make an antenna? Well, I can't make my antenna work. I'm a general. I'm an extra, and they don't have how to make a station work just because you have a license. Let me reset. Kind of like a commercial driver's license. I've been doing this stuff for 32 years, folks, and I see it every day. You have a CDL, you can drive a truck, doesn't mean you can do it very good. I've got 3 million plus miles under my belt. I've never been in the ditch, and I've never been in the wreck. I'm pretty damn good at it. I'm not real good at ham radio because I got into it for what I want to get into it. All these requirements that are being lessened to let people into it, I think that's a good thing. You're not going to get on the road to kill somebody because you have a license. I don't know. I just wish some of the older hams, sorry Dan, sorry Dave, lighten up a little bit. It's gonna get more people into the community, and those just might be the people that cover your butt in a situation. And I guess that's about all I have to say about that. KC0 Killgate.
K0PRB with a comment on that license analogy.
Okay, we have quite a queue here. N7GES with the TechNet. Marty, I do have to ask one thing, though. You did make a point with the code. What I'd like to know is, do you really think that the changes they're making here are going to be that much encouragement? And do you think that those changes are going to compel people not only to get their license, but to learn how to save somebody's butt when there's a problem?
All right, so you have two questions. Nope, it's not going to encourage anybody, and nope, it's not going to encourage anybody to save somebody's butt. Point in case, I know several preppers. They have VHF, UHF, they have their own equipment. They don't give 1 iota, 2 cents worth, FCC rules, government rules, they don't care. They're going to operate when and where they want to operate, okay? So, back to the prepper thing that Dave said, it's a moot point. They're going to operate when they want to. They're going to take the repeaters over when they want to. Matter of fact, when the stuff hits the fan, there's not going to be any repeaters, so you better be able to operate simplex. That's another story. Is it going to encourage anybody? It's not going to encourage me. I've already talked to HF. I've talked to all around the world. I've talked to it from my house, from my truck, from my pickup, everywhere. No, it's not going to encourage me. All these other people, no. I really don't think so. I really don't see where the problem is.
Okay. Is that to be added to the queue?
All righty. Thank you, Dave. I got you on the queue. All right. We're going to have to break a bit and go back through the queue here because we have a huge one lined up. Here's who I have thus far. WIQ, K0EV, RBT, I think you were in there with a comment, Jim, and I didn't mean to ignore you, and DDZ. So let's go back to WIQ if you can remember what you wanted to say, Carrie.
Now, I'm going to go back to the idea of the human being. Every human being decides what's real early in their life, and they use their 5 senses to do that. And most of the scientific advancements that have been made are working on things that are kind of in the abstract. The one that gets harped on a lot is Ohm's law. Well, the idea of current is actually an abstract idea in the first place. And then you stack onto that a whole bunch of different abstracts. And a lot of people don't see the sense in doing that. Only the higher people that want to learn about things like the universe, things like current, things like radios, television, those are the people that want to be enticed into amateur radio because they have a natural ability to want to chase knowledge, period. So, I mean, hey, that's my view. And I agree with Marty a lot. Changing the privileges for the lower class license or giving more privileges to the lower class license isn't going to change that. It's the people that want to learn are the people that will want to learn about amateur radio. Because amateur radio can be a gateway into almost everything else technical. Back to net.
Okay, thank you. K0EV, Eric, good evening.
Good evening, Kevin. This is Kilo Zero Echo Victor. Let's see, I think a few brought up about old-timers and how we're, sort of set in our ways and don't like change and all that kind of stuff. Well, I can empathize with that, but, we're going to die off eventually. I mean, the CW Forever guys are pretty much gone. Either they're dead or they've accepted the current state of ham radio. So, hang in there. We'll be gone soon. But I don't actually put myself in that bracket. I think this is a good idea. It's not the first time that the ARRL has gotten together with the FCC and proposed changes, and they've been adopted in one form or another. The Tech Plus, the appliance operator stuff. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's happened in ham radio, and most of it's worked out. But we do have a little bit of an issue with the declining numbers, and everybody gets worried about that. I'm not so worried. We still have tech people out there. There's the whole maker community. Let me reset. Okay. But I think it's a great idea. For one thing, besides, the object of this proposal from the ARRL to the FCC is to encourage new ham radio licensees as well as retain current ones. Well, the way you retain people is to have them operate. And, oh boy, I hear there's a lot of current day obstructions to operating. Being able to run data on the HF bands, I think, would be a big plus for a lot of current technicians, and I think they'd have a lot of fun doing that. And besides, it could be useful, just look at what happened in Puerto Rico. That was not all VHF, UHF. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Back to you, Kevin, K0EV.
Okay, thank you, Eric. KC0RBT. You still in there, Jim?
Yeah, Kevin, I am still in here, and I didn't really have a comment, but I will comment. I agree with Marty. Had they not dropped the code requirement, I probably would have never gotten my ham radio license. I'm kind of half tone deaf, and it was really difficult for me to copy CW. So I'm glad they did that. And in fact, when I went and got my extra, I was all prepped for all the math problems, and I'd actually practiced on those, and I was ready to run calculations. I didn't get a single math question. So anyway, it was not hard to get my extra, but and I agree with Dan. If you're gonna move up in your class, there should be some requirements for extra study, extra knowledge, and I appreciate that. I appreciate what the FCC has done as far as requiring more knowledge in order to move up in your class. But anyway, I'm glad they did drop CW. So that's all. That was all I had for a comment, Kevin. Back to you, KC0RBT.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jim, and it's sure good to have you in here. All right, Dave. DDZ, finally. Go ahead.
Kevin, I wanted to answer your questions again, but would you restate your questions one more time?
That depends on which questions. Are you referring to what I asked Marty a few minutes ago? What was it? I believe it was, would the new requirements encourage, do you think they would encourage people to join, to get their licenses like the dropping of the code did? And would the new privileges encourage people to learn enough about amateur radio to use it in an emergency situation in the best way possible? Are those the questions you were referring to?
Yes, sir, they were. And so for the first question, no. I don't think that it will alone encourage new amateur radios into the hobby. But what it is doing is somebody is thinking about how to encourage new amateur radios into the amateur radio operators into the hobby, and that's something I think our community has lost somewhat. I don't think that it has been as encouraging or easy to get in. There are going to be people that will want to learn new things and get into the hobby. Myself, I got into the hobby because I heard people talking about things that I was interested in on an SDR that I bought when I was doing stuff in with a Arduino and a Raspberry Pi. So you don't necessarily know where people are going to come into. And will it encourage people to learn the emergency use? Also, I think no. The answer is the answer to that. I think that it isn't necessarily the reason why people get into the hobby. I think that it is a thing that they find out about after the hobby, or at least in my case, I never knew about the ARRL, the Amateur Radio Emergency Service, or how amateur radio affected that. I'm going to let this drop for a sec. So, I think that, again, is a shortcoming of the amateur radio community. I don't think that we as a community are reaching people and getting to the people that actually care. As a comment was said earlier about the maker community is there, and they would probably be quite interested in our community, but I think we have trouble reaching them. There's also people, the drone community of people building racing drones, and they're using UHF and VHF and higher to talk to their drones, and I think that they would find it very interesting, but I don't think we're reaching them either. The point that I guess I'm trying to make is that the ARRL is very concerned about reaching those new hams, and they're trying to come up with solutions to do that. And a lot of times I hear people trying to stop people from getting into the hobby, and that's what doesn't make sense to me. To me, from my perspective, I want the hobby to grow. I want to have more people to talk to and people to enjoy the hobby like I enjoy the hobby, because I do enjoy the hobby, and that's why I got into it, is because I enjoy the things, I enjoy the conversations, and I enjoy talking to people that have similar interests, whether they be in amateur radio or in some other field. I think that there's a lot of crossover that can happen in amateur radio, and I think that that some are missing the point of what the ARRL is trying to do.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dave. This is N7GES with the NCARC Tech Net. Do we have other comments at this time?
N0BF.
W0ASP.
Let's stand by. I heard 2 out of 3. At the very beginning, I heard BF. Who else was in at the very beginning there?
K0PRB.
Okay, very good. And I don't remember. I hope I didn't miss you before. Okay, so I have 3 folks here in queue. N0BF. Go ahead.
Okay, very good, Kevin. Well, my comment's quite short. Again, thanks for putting me onto this issue. I had no idea about it. Well, you got quite a net going here. And I did read it, the ARRL announcement, and I'd encourage people to do that. I had no idea that there's 378,000 techs, about half the amateur community. But I agree that if it does improve the ability to have emergency communications, which is the original purpose of ham radio, if it does that, I would agree with it. Anyway, that's my comment. So back to you there, Kevin, N0BF.
Okay. Thank you very much, Steve. PRB, go ahead, Phil.
Oh, yeah, that last comment was very interesting. You know, half the community are techs. That raises another question. Why are they just technicians? Why haven't they pushed themselves to go further? Because, okay, that's just a question that can just go on out there, and everybody can think about that. The other is the analogy that Marty out there about getting his CDL. Okay, I don't have a CDL. I could get one if I wanted to, but the point here is, if I want to get a CDL, the way I want to get it is for somebody to park a bus in a parking lot, let me get behind the wheel, drive it across the lot, and give me my license. That is the analogy of what's happening with today, with many things. Too many people think they don't have to work for it. They're privileged to get it. So what my question is, for Marty, how long did it take for him to get a CDL? Did he have to go through a lot of testing to get it? Was he proud of getting that CDL with all the work he put into it? There's part of that in all of this, in getting certain privileges. K0PRB.
Amen.
The last check-in, and I do have a queue, but could you go ahead and give me the call again? Okay. Please remember, give a prefix, a suffix if you want to make a comment here. That just makes it easier. QOK, Marty, do you want to comment on that at all?
Well, that could be a long, long conversation. I didn't have to go study to get a CDL, Phil. Back in the, I've been doing this 32 years. And back in the day, it was a chauffeur's license. Well, that was before my time. I apologize. It was a Class A. Now it's a CDL. I got licensed through the United States Army. So I just walked into Fort Leonard Wood with the license, and they handed me a piece of paper, and then when I came back to Colorado, I had a Class A, and then when they upgraded, we went to a CDL. And the likening to a CDL to a ham license, boy, there's a bunch of jackwagons out there driving trucks. They don't have a frickin' clue what they're doing. Kind of like a bunch of amateurs out here that have a general license or an extra. They don't have a clue. They don't even know how to spell ohm. They don't even know how to spell volts. They don't know how to spell meters. But yet they're licensed. By God, they have that license. So let's give them that privilege so they can talk. That's my point.
And so you want more of them out there like that?
Well, evidently, no, I don't want more stupid people out there, but I want more hams out there. You're taking this out of context. I think we need to have more hams, and I'm glad that we don't have code to get a license. That was ridiculous, in my own opinion. You're a perfect example. You got a license. You don't know anything about it, but you're asking questions, and that's a great thing. There's a lot of truck drivers out there that have a license. They don't know anything about it, but they're out there on the roadways putting people at risk and killing people. I guess it's two different things. I should not have used the analogy of CDLs versus general and extra. It was probably a stupid thing on my part. Apologize. Take it back. Because you can learn on the radio a little bit better than you can learn on the road. Yeah, two different classes of citizens right there. So, yeah, I guess it was a bad analogy.
Okay. Thank you very much. We are getting kind of close to 7:30 here, so I do have Terry, ASP. I went that was waiting in the queue, but we'll probably need to be wrapping this up here shortly so that we don't run too far over time. So Terry, please go ahead.
Thank you, Kevin. W0ASP. I do have a comment on this, and once you think about the ARRL as being a political organization, as is the FCC, and to realize that the spectrum is a limited resource, and there is competition for these resources, and there is a lot of commercial and government competition for HF spectrum. So the ARRL might be thinking, perhaps, that if we get more numbers registered into users of the HF spectrum, that it might not be taken by very powerful government and very rich commercial enterprises. Just a thought. W0ASP, back to net.
And this is N7GES with the NCARC TechNet. All right. Wow. I think we've covered a lot of issues, a lot of ground. I don't know if we've solved anything, but we've had some awareness. I do want to encourage everybody to encourage amateur radio, encourage study, encourage learning, encourage people to get in and really enjoy it, and not give up, or perhaps not get into it for the wrong reasons, which then may cause them to turn around and ignore it and forget about it. I don't know exactly the best ways all of that can be done, but certainly we've brought some good points to bear here, and hopefully that will help us get better ideas for how to encourage it in the right ways here. So I'd like to suggest a topic for next week, so that it's out there rather than waiting on it. Forgive me while I look for it here. Stand by a moment. N7GES. Okay. How about this? As suggested earlier to me by Dave, and I again will just remind you, any suggestions you have for topics, suggestions you have about the net format and that sort of thing are greatly appreciated. And once again, PAO@NCARC.net, as in Public Affairs Officer at Northern Colorado Amateur Radio Club.net would be probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. Next week, antenna support systems, towers, fixed and tilt over and crank up, poles, trees, etc. Probably lots of things we can discuss there. We've had at least a few accidents with towers that either destroyed antennas and or harmed people. Some of that certainly cannot always be avoided, but it is something certainly to consider. Longevity of your antennas is an important consideration with all of that. So if you would give that some thought and see what questions you might have, what issues you might like to bring up. I think that could be end up being a good net for us. I don't know if we've discussed this recently. I hope not. But there's probably always more information we could come up with. So I hope that's acceptable to everybody. Let me reset. And we'll proceed with that, at least at this point in time. I thank all of you very much for contributing tonight, and I thank everybody for being very considerate about others' opinions. And I think that in itself can certainly be an encouragement toward other people joining amateur radio. And so I'm going to quit. I'm losing my voice, and I think I'm probably going to retire for the evening here. But I do thank all of you for joining in and making this a good net. And if you have comments or suggestions, do let me know. Thank you to the NCARC for making this possible for us. And I will clear and return the repeater to normal use. And 73 to all. This is N7GES. Thank you, and very, very pleasant evening.